What's up, y'all? And of course, welcome to another alternative factuals video. This video is something usually outside of the topic, but something that I kind of do want to discuss simply because I do videos about these specific things in relation to their comic book counterparts and publication histories and all that good stuff and all that hoopla. So, but before I get into any of this, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe, and let me know your opinions. This is an opinion-based YouTube channel, so let me know your theories, opinions, all that stuff. That's what I live for. That's what I breathe for. That's what I need in my life. But without further ado, let's kind of jump into it. So this topic is something I've kind of been, I wouldn't say it's been heavily debated, probably, but this is just my personal opinion, and obviously people are entitled to their opinions, and I welcome different opinions, of course. And let's kind of get into it. So in my opinion, I think DC Comics have been killing Marvel, and let me put a time frame on this. So we already know we have the all different Marvel that ran, I think it's running from 2015 to now, obviously, and then you have DC Rebirth, which started in 2016 till now. So I'll be using that time frame to kind of use that to kind of make my point or whatever, how I feel about it. But here's my reasoning on why I think DC is kind of killing Marvel and what my issue is and all that good stuff, and probably I'll get into what they probably could do a little better. But now the reason why I think DC is going crazy right now in terms of the comic books is simply because they're telling better stories as a whole. And one of the key components in telling a great story is when you introduce a character, or when you're telling a story about a character, they don't just focus on really massive events. And I think that's one of the problems that Marvel has had even before All New or Different Marvel, where they seem to have these really massive events, but they have the tie-ins, they have all that stuff, and you don't really get to get that real backstory about a lot of characters. I know they do have some stories where the characters are very interesting. For example, one of my favorite stories in All New All Different Marvel would be like, I think it's Venom. If I remember correctly, this is Venom Volume 4, number 1, and that's the one with Null and Donny Cates. Donny Cates, oh my Jesus, he murdered that story. So the reason why that story was so successful in my opinion was the fact that they told the story about Venom. They're using information that we already know about the character that's already been established for years and years and years and years, way back to like when he was originally kind of introduced into Marvel Comics. But instead of like retconning something or totally changing something or kind of creating these situations that kind of cause those plot holes, he expanded on it and then created Null. And it gave not only the symbiote, like the whole race of symbiotes, a purpose, but in a sense it kind of gave them a better backstory on why they are the way that they are. And it was very interesting because in a way this also does introduce another kind of cosmic entity, because Null existed before the beginning of time. But it also tells like a very interesting story on the relationship between Eddie Brock and the symbiote, as well as him actually finding out that he has a son and, well, a brother actually, the relationship between his father, and then just how the whole interaction kind of goes forward, because a lot of the story does have action, but also a lot of it focuses on the relationships, which is one of my favorite parts of the story. Now, Marvel does not usually do that when it comes to their big events. So like All New Different Marvel, for example, is we have like All New Hawkeye. Yeah, I mean, it's okay, it's whatever, but not really my thing. You have All New, who really cares about the Inhumans? I don't even know why I'm bringing that up. All New All Different Avengers, okay. All New Wolverine, Amazing Spider-Man. Well, Spider-Man I think is the only one where like it's not, I wouldn't say, I enjoyed it a little less than the whole Venom run, but that's just personal opinion. Like I said, I think they canceled Blade, if I remember correctly. Don't hold me to that, I have not caught up on that one. But then you got like Captain America Sam Wilson, Captain America Steve Rogers, where they have all these different stories, and yes, to some degree that they're very interesting in their own right for very specific reasons, but you can't really get into it, and it's just it's a lot of the stories I just don't care about. That's what it is. I don't have any attachment to a lot of these characters, and I don't really care about them. Rather than if we flip over to DC, for example, we have a lot of stories where I got extremely attached to the characters. We have like Super Sons, for example. I love Super Sons. It's a relationship between Jonathan Kent and Damian Wayne, the two sons of Superman, this extremely powerful person in DC Comics, where, you know, he can almost do anything. And I say anything just simply because they usually write the plot so that way he could do anything. And then you have Batman, The dude who cannot be defeated because he's omnipresent, omniscient, and overwhelmingly just a reality warper on a multiversal scale. Batman, who can never lose to anyone because he has a contingency and a backup plan for everything. So it's a very interesting, because you see the relationship between their two sons, what they bring to the table coming from these two separate heroes, these two separate upbringings, as well as we already know that Damian is dealing with this whole thing with the League of Assassins, while Jonathan Kent's a lot more chill, a lot more like kiddish. When I say kiddish, he's a lot more fun, outgoing, and I think right now he's like 15 or something like that, but I'm not going to get into that one. I think that's the only thing I didn't really enjoy, the fact that they kind of did that time skip. I think they're talking about it right now, but I'm a little behind, so don't hold me on that one. But it's like stories like that, even what they were telling with Wonder Woman and her, they expanded her backstory about her powers and the relationship between the magic that gives her kind of her strength and what makes her armor so powerful. And they kind of expanded that where she went into the Justice League Dark for a short period of time. You had the Trinity comics, you had Supergirl, as well as you had Justice League No Justice, which I wasn't crazy about it. They had their parts, but even just Doomsday Clock alone, amazing in DC Rebirth. So DC is really doing a good job. And the primary reason, like I said, they are getting these stories out. They're doing well with these stories. And the reason why people are craving these stories is simply for one reason. They're telling the backstory of each of their characters. They're pulling where basically you get to know about Dr. Manhattan. You get to know that he altered, time in a sense where he moved the lantern of Alan Scott and he never became the Green Lantern. And then Dr. Manhattan perceives the past, present, and future all at once, but he still can differentiate the two. And the fact that he's been modifying things differently, where he saved Superman's father, Jor-El, from the explosion of Krypton, which then placed him in the present time, and now he's alive, and then he was working under the name of Mr. Oz. And then after the name of Mr. Oz, we come to realize, like, obviously he was working in a way as a kind of liaison between Dr. Manhattan and, like, I guess the rest of the Earth or whatever like that. But even the fact that the Comedian's alive, where they took that from the Watchmen universe and Dr. Manhattan somehow pulled him from being killed at the very last second, altered the timeline and brought him over into the DC universe, which we see him killing a lot of supervillains in that whole underground meeting that they were having in the DC universe. So Doomsday Clock has been extremely interesting, and even like I said, just DC Rebirth as a whole has been very been a very good read. Just they're taking their time with a lot of these things, and they're not really rushing it. And I feel like Marvel is not doing that in their comics right now. They're not taking the time to really write these characters out. They're not really taking the time to let's think these things out. And like I said, there's a couple that I'm really on board with. Like I said, I already said Venom. I like Amazing Spider-Man as well. It's just overall, I didn't even like the return of like Wolverine. I wasn't really on board with that either, and that's just simply, I don't know, like, besides the fact that obviously in comics characters cannot die officially or for real, or whatever you want to call it, but it's just like the way they kind of went about it, I wasn't really completely feeling. There were some parts of the story I was really into. I like the mystery when he first initially showed up with just a space stone, but then with that whole thing with, I believe, Persephone and all that stuff. If you want to check all that stuff out, like the Venom run and the one with the Return of Wolverine, I would recommend you check out Blur Without Fear. I'll put his link in the description. I'll put the playlist links in the description as well. You can check out his channels, and I'll be sure to link at least one of those playlists at the end of the video or something of that nature, so that way you're able to go check those out if you're not caught up with those already. But to kind of wrap up this video, like I said, I'm not going to get too much into issues, dates, and publication date. I'm not going to do all that. This is just personal opinion, and I want you to go in the comments if you feel like you have to put like, hey, I read Thunderbolts Volume 4 and issues number 1 and 3 was like the best. But then if you want to get into Ultimates Volume 4 or Volume Uncanny Avengers Volume 3 or whatever, if you want to talk about that in the comments, that's perfectly fine. I'll definitely have that discussion with you. But this video was not like kind of to do that. It's just more or less I think DC's doing a really good job. Character development is extremely important when you're writing a lot of these stories, and I think Marvel is not really doing that right now. They're kind of lacking in that department compared to DC, where they kind of knew the mistakes that they made in New 52 and the whole thing where some stories did work, which is why they kept it into DC Rebirth, and then other stories didn't quite work, but instead of completely erasing it, we got a combination of the both from what did work out of those situations, and they brought it in with like the combination of the old stuff that we saw pre-New 52. And I think that's what the issue is with Marvel, where they had good stories, and even though in my opinion I think DC was just a little easier to follow overall, and that's just throughout the course of like however long I've been reading it, Marvel has not quite been as easy to kind of follow, especially they have massive like amounts of tie-ins for a lot of their huge story events, and I think also they rely too heavily on massive events to kind of tell stories instead of focusing on less events, small events, but then taking the time to get to know the characters and the relationships that they have going on, and then taking the time to move forward from there. But you let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you feel like Marvel's killing DC or DC's killing Marvel, or you think they're both trash, you know, whatever you feel, let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any other publication studios or anything like that that are telling good stories right now, you can tell me that as well, because I'm very interested. And if you're new to the channel, please be sure to like, share, and of course subscribe and leave a comment down below. And I hope to see you later on. Peace out.